Hello, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the UNIBEN Alumni Series. It's a show where we discuss with distinguished alumni of the great University of Benin, men and women who have passed through the four walls of one of the greatest tertiary institutions in West Africa. That's the University of Benin. On today's episode, we have Destiny Ogedegbe. Destiny Ogedegbe is a corporate attorney at Paul Weiss in New York, a world-renowned law firm with offices in major cities across the globe. And in 2018, Destiny graduated with a first-class degree from the Faculty of Law, University of Benin, making him the second first-class graduate from the faculty since the faculty was established in 1981. Thank you very much, Destiny, for joining us today.
Thank you for that very generous introduction.
Thank you. We'll go straight into it, Destiny.
Of course.
I want to ask, how difficult was it for you to earn a first-class degree in law from the University of Benin, especially considering it was only before you, it was only Mavis, the lady that achieved that unthinkable feat before you. So how difficult was it for you?
Before I answer that question, I have one question that is really, running
Okay.
I'd like to put out there first, which is, how did you come about this? When I saw your message, I was like, I haven't heard about this before.
Yeah.
I had never heard about a platform for UNIBEN alumni. So I was thinking, this is quite the initiative, and whoever is responsible, you obviously must have been someone who, one, I imagine you have a very, very keen interest in excellence in general, regardless of the field. And then, besides your interest in excellence, because a lot of persons are interested in excellence, but they are not quite interested in doing something of this nature. I also imagine that you probably have a very strong affinity with your roots, Benin City, and all that.
Now you are putting me on the hot seat. It's supposed to be the other way around.
No, it's an interesting way to start, because I would really, really love to know what your motivations were, because you're not in the country. So for you to be doing this, there's something you love that is not quite quantifiable in monetary terms. So what would that be?
Okay, let's start this way. For University of Benin, especially for me, it's really special to me, because at some point of my primary school, I attended staff school just a few years. Then I went to UDSS for my 6 years in secondary school. My first degree was from UNIBEN, master's degree from UNIBEN. I worked in the institution too for about 6 years. Wow. So most part of my life has been around the University of Benin. And the network, the friends, what I've achieved to a reasonable extent has been attributed to UNIBEN Connect or something related to UNIBEN. At one point also, I was a public relations officer of the Alumni Association in UNIBEN. So I'm really, really passionate about our institution.
That's a lot of history around UNIBEN. It makes sense. Okay. Yeah, forgive me for putting you on. I just
that's fine.
Honestly. Yeah. Okay. All right. To your question, with the benefit of hindsight, it sounds really funny, because I've obviously done a lot of things after UNIBEN that were way, way, way more complicated than that. So with the benefit, it feels like, why was that even really a problem at the time? But then it was not easy at all. And a part of why it wasn't easy was personal. The other part is institutional. The other part is academic. I'll put it in those three buckets. On a personal level, I would say some of the difficulties that stem from that would be my personality. So ordinarily, and it was more evident when I was in UNIBEN, I'm generally quite recluse. I like to be alone. Like many of my friends today that I knew from UNIBEN, people that have known me for like 10 years, they still tease me about it. Like, guy, why do you just want to sit in your house for days? You don't want, I was quite recluse. And why that was a problem was, in my entire 100 level, for instance, I said nothing in class. I was just a very quiet person. I used to teach then in some lecture centers back at Upper Sokomba where I grew up. So I would go back.
You be Upper boy.
Exactly. I grew up in Upper. Much of my life in Benin was in Upper. So my uncle had a lecture center then. I would go, I would teach, I'll come back to school around 10, 11 a.m., start attending classes. So much of the classes before then, I would miss them because I was really trying to rack up money, all of that stuff. So 100 level, I was completely dark horse. Nobody knew me. And I was completely fine with that until, the results came out. I had a 4.9. Everybody went bananas because it was crazy.
Who is this guy? Really?
Like, who is this guy? So that attention really, really, really overwhelmed me. I became really scared. I was always trying to hide myself. I really struggled from a personality standpoint to deal with all that came with that because it's 5 years. It's not 1 year at the law school. Once you are on that radar, people know you. Your juniors know you. Your classmates know you. Some lecturers begin to know you. I remember a particular incident in my 300 level where I was the only person who had A's in all the law courses. There was this particular lecturer. She taught us law of torts. She came to class and she was like, "There's this guy. I've never met this person." He mentioned my matriculation number. They called me. I was in class. I could not get myself to raise my head and just say, "This is the person I'm speaking to." Not because I was scared that she's probably going to victimize me or whatnot. Because from a personality standpoint, he wasn't some of my friends just couldn't understand. Like, if I had all of these things that you had, forget it. So, but I just don't have that personality. I really struggle with being confident. Sometimes if I spoke in class, I would notice, the energy, this radioactive ooze of this boy, does he have to say anything? I was always quite conscious how people thought of me, So, and these things are not easy to deal with because when you're in school, you're not exactly an adult. You are still relatively young.
Yeah,
you are
just
still finding
growing,
yourself. You are still getting to know this. Exactly. If it's now, obviously, you are mature. You know yourself a lot more.
Yeah.
But then I was still trying to wrap my head around, why do I really act this way? Should I act like other people? But it was really difficult. So there was a personal challenge there. On the academic side, it was not. Law is not a very simple course in the arts and humanities. So for the simple fact that, first, it's arguably one department you have a lot of smart people. That goes without saying. And then the course in itself, substantively, it's not a very. I would describe law as a very malleable course. It's something that you can flex in different directions. So what that means is there's hardly any consensus in the way you approach a legal problem. And that's basically the model which allows lawyers to make money from the practice, because if there was any consensus, there will be no need for us to
argue.
Exactly. You are good in your own right. I am good in my own right. We have a different way of approaching legal problems. So, but in an academic setting, what that means is that a lot of times you will disagree with lecturers who are not exactly flexible. They are not exactly open-minded enough to accommodate your views because, they have egotistical problems, which is very common amongst academics and intellectuals. They don't like to feel slighted. So you struggle with that partly. And the way I was able to manage that was not easy at all. and afterwards, I began to realize this is why many persons don't get first classes in faculty of law, besides the institutional problem, which I will get to in a bit. But from a strictly academic standpoint, one reason a lot of persons can't make first classes there is it's very hard for people to come up with a strategy on how to answer questions that lecturers will find favorable. In law, it is very, very hard. And that was what I spent a significant portion of my time in UNIBEN doing. And I used to tell my friends, look, one thing I know God has blessed me with is if I read something, I'm able to understand whatever it is I've read. That was my academic strong suit. So before an exam, I wasn't thinking, oh, let me flip through these pages again and remember. No, what I was really thinking was, we have about 300 persons in this class. These lecturers don't know me. They've never heard my name. The first time they are going to know me is through my script. How do you approach a legal problem in a way that the lecturer clearly distinguishes and says, this person is different. Because if you are not able to do that, you are very likely to get a ton of B's. Hardly, because there were up to like 6 courses throughout my academic period there where I was the only person who made A in the class. And people will come to me and be like, what did you say? And I used to tell them, look, it is not the problem. Do you think you are the only smart person here? Whatever legal definition of whatever you like, for instance, let's say you are doing criminal law, and then everybody learns, section 383, which defines stealing, or 412, which defines armed robbery. These are pedestrian issues. Everybody would know it because everybody wants to pass the exam. So you have to be able to do something extra that the lecturer says, I'm like, this approach is quite unconventional. I like this guy. That's literally, because it's one thing to be smart. The other thing is you must understand how to eliminate your opponents, which is basically the art of passing exams. That's a different skill entirely. Some persons are smart. They don't really understand how to eliminate, like in a competitive environment, they don't know exactly how to strategize because it's difficult to strategize. To make any brilliant strategy, it means you must be able to approximate what the average strategy is, and then you try to beat that. That is not a very easy thing for many people to do. Yeah. So I struggled with that. So from a strictly academic standpoint, the hurdles I had to pass through mentally and academically just to set myself apart, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. And then there was the institutional problem, especially when I got to my final year. I had a lecturer who told me point blank that I wasn't going to make it first class because that was the first time he knew me. And he told me that how could I have been in this faculty and I did not come to his office to say hello and all of that. In my head, I was like, we both know that was not necessary, and we know the only reason you feel this way is because you want to be part of
the success story.
Either to be part of the success story or to sabotage it altogether.
Yeah.
So, I had to speak to a lot of persons who were really up against me. In my finals, I set out to make a 5.0 all my courses. In my first semester, I had a 5.0 and everything went bananas. So my project supervisor at the time, she gave me a C in my project. And I told her there is no scenario. Yeah. And I told her there is literally no scenario where I get a C in my project. It is not possible. I can spontaneously write an exam on my project topic and I will not get a C. Much less sitting down, doing research, deliberate research, and it's just not, like, it makes no sense. There is no, and she was like, well, I should take it up with whomever I want to take it up. So my friends, I had a very great support system. A lot of my friends wanted me to make that first class. They joined me. We would rally around the lecture halls, going to professors and speaking to them, look at what I'm facing. Some professors were able to offer some amount of help. Some others could not really do anything because they felt like if they were to say anything, they would be fighting against the cabal. So it got to a point I got completely burnt out because there was nothing I could do. I was just helpless. And then I used to tell my friends then, I would tell them, it's fine. I'm still going to be the best graduate student. It's okay if I don't make it first class. But then I was pretty stupid. I didn't exactly know how much a first class was going to help me eventually.
Going forward, yeah.
I was just a bit fine with, I tried. Everybody knows I tried, so it's fine. But then something miraculous happened. In our finals, before my set, for about the last 8 years prior to my set, it had never happened. And what happened was the Council of Legal Education began to send external screeners who were professors from other universities to different faculties. So they sent a bunch of professors from UI, from Babcock, from Igbinedion, and I think some other schools. LASU, I remember LASU. They brought about 6 folks. They came to UNIBEN, and I recall a lecturer telling me that they looked at the results of every person in the graduating class, and they were like, this guy had a 5.0 in his first semester. There's no way he has a C in his project. Okay. That just doesn't make any sense. So they took my project, they re-upped it, they screened it, they went through, they re-upped it from 54, which was a C, to 86.
Whoa, to A.
Yeah. So eventually I had an A in my project, right? So it was some miraculous happenstance. And that was how I was able to seal my 5.0 graduated with the 4.8. It was totally
Oh, your name actually came to play. Destiny actually came to play there.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, there were layers of problems, and that's why I like to break them into buckets. There were institutional problems, but there were also academic and personal problems.
Yeah. You said the 100 level, you had a 4.9. Was it at that point you felt, okay, I could make it first class? Or before coming to the institution, you already had that in mind?
No, not at all. So before I came into the institution, I did not think I was going to make a first class. I wasn't even aspiring for a first class. And, to go off on a tangent a bit, this is why it's very good to have mentors. Whether horizontal or vertical mentors, mentors who are on your level or mentors who are ahead of you. They help you like reorient your desires. But when I started out, I did not think I could make a first class. I did not even really appreciate what that meant. I just wanted to graduate like pretty much every person. So when it happened in 100 level, it was a shocker. It was a complete shocker to me. And some seniors would tell me to keep it up. But even when I spoke with certain seniors, I did not sense that, belief that I could do it. And it was fine because I did not have it myself. I remember speaking to some person and they would tell you it's in 400 level, you know if you can really, graduate to the first class. I heard things like that. And I did not put my mind to it until my 400 level because it was in my 400 level I had the lowest of all my grades. Initially my 100 level 4.9, 200 level 4.8, 300 level 4.8. It was always very high. 400 level, I think I had a 4.2. It was brutal. And then I told myself, I'm going to make it 5.0 in my final years to seal this. I don't care what anybody says, it's going to happen. So it was in my 400 level, I really said to myself, I'm actually really close. Like, the reason I didn't have that expectation was I felt 400 level would probably just break me down, take it completely out of the realm of possibilities. But when I said it was a 4.0, I was like, I just need a decent 4.5 will give me a first class. So I'm just going to go for a 5.0. It was then I really took up the challenge. Like I stayed with my younger brother in my finance, and he did most of the cooking, everything. He was like, you just be reading. I was just reading. It was crazy. So that was when I really, really took it seriously because I didn't want to feel heartbroken. I didn't want to really hold on to something that might be destroyed in 400 level. But every senior I spoke with, they will tell you, oh, when you get to 400 level, all of this is going to go away. That's when they really break people's spirits. So I was like, maybe I should not really expect much. I will just keep seeing how it goes. But then I got to 300 level and I saw that my 300 level, I had A's in all my law courses. That's crazy. So if I'm able to get a decent 4-pointer in my 400 level, maybe I have a chance. And that was when it clicked. I really, in my 400 level, I had a 4-pointer. I was like, this is completely doable, right? I'm already this close. I just need to make sure final year I seal it. And that was when I really took it seriously. 100 level to 300 level, I wouldn't say I was keen on making it first. I just knew that I was doing very well. I was top of my class.
I want to ask about Mavis again. Was Mavis fit a motivation for you too? Because you were not in school when Mavis had the first class. Yeah, I think that was in 2012 or so. So when you get to find out someone has done it just to one person, a faculty that has produced different sons, and 2 MBA presidents and captains of industries. So was our fit a motivation for you? Say you can do it as well.
Yeah, to some extent, theoretically it was. And why I use the word theoretically is that I never knew Mavis. She never came around the faculty, because inspiration is a very tricky thing, which is at least the way I think of inspiration is to inspire someone, you have to be able to trigger something within them. Which is why I don't like to take the entire credit when someone tells me, oh, you inspired me, because I believe that you can be speaking to 1,000 people in a gathering, and only 10 of those persons will feel like you really triggered something in them, right? So in a sense, if you think about inspiration, you are not depositing something in someone, you are triggering something that was already there. And that's why you find that many of the people you will inspire to do the things you have done, they were usually people who were already heading in that direction. They just needed someone to like
Yeah.
keep pushing them.
Push.
Like you can almost tell that without you, they would have gone pretty far. I mean, that's not to say you didn't try for them, but there were always people in that curve, right? Because people who are not in that curve, you can hardly say anything that will move them in any way. So all of this, what I'm trying to say is, I think I sort of needed Mavis to be present, say something. We didn't have that connection. She was very far removed, not deliberately though.
Yeah.
She worked in, we both worked eventually in the same law firm with Aswa Godalo. So the firm is arguably either the first or the second largest law firm in Nigeria, and we do a lot of work with like internationals, and so it's a very, very, very busy place to work in as a lawyer. You are literally at the top of the corporate bell curve in Nigeria. And so when I started working there, I understood why she would literally have no chance and no time to do any of that. She was not there, right? But the fact that she had done it before, right?
Yeah.
It was a huge motive, especially my 400 level. It was because I knew that I heard that she went through certain hurdles in her 400 and 500 levels, and I was like, this is a simulation of what happened to Mavis. So maybe if she was able to get through, I would be able to get through myself, right? Yeah, but to the extent that she wasn't like some other seniors who would come around, talk to you, tell you about their time in school, that part was missing. If I had Mavis from like 100 level, maybe as someone I could reach out to, text and call, I would have probably had that dream a lot earlier than I did.
Yeah.
But just the sheer fact that she did it, it was theoretically very helpful.
Okay. In one of your articles, I read when you said you sold on the streets of Benin before coming to the university.
Yeah.
And sorry to say, if I may translate, it means you came from a family with limited means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that serve as a motivation for you to succeed academically, which will, most times, bring comfort to you and your immediate family, at least?
Yes, it did. It did in the sense that I think very early on, I already knew I did not have a lot of talent. I was a brilliant footballer when I was still back in upper and all of that, but I knew none of this was going to take me anywhere. It was pretty clear to me, and I think that was something I had a very vicious way of looking at situations that some of my contemporaries didn't have at the time. I was able to easily approximate chances, probabilities, and just reach a conclusion very quickly. I was like, the chances that I would become a footballer is out of it, right? So, and when I looked at everything, one of the things I knew I could fall back on was intellect. I knew God had that going for my family. We were broke, but my father is an extremely intelligent person. My dad, my mom was not educated to a tertiary institution, but my dad was. He was, and he is a fantastic literature. He attended University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He was the best in his class then. He studied under Achebe. He's very, very literate. So he sort of handed that down to us very early on, very, very early on. Throughout my primary school, my secondary school days, I was always top of the class. Like there was no single time where I came second in class. So I knew very instinctively that, I have something that I can use, right?
Okay.
So when I was a teenager, that was when this whole the crisis in my family happened. My dad and my mom, they separated, and I was living with my mom. Sometimes we go to places like Oka Market to sell. It was a very terrible period. I was always thinking, how would I be able to, what can I do? So I tried my hands with many things. My mom would take us to the village then. I come from Ewosi, and that's one village in Orion. She would take us to the village, we'll help my grandmom. I always just knew that it can't just be this. We can't just end here. It doesn't make any sense. When I was with some of those kids, I knew that I had some level of smarts that could help me. Like if I really leverage on it, it could help me. So 2011, 2012, I told my uncle, look, allow me teach. That was one way I would be able to like really explore this side of me. Because they were already, as early as 2012, there were already temptations to do some other things that were not really forthright because of the environment you grew up with. You meet
Yeah.
some bad boys, they tell you to do this and do that. So there was always that temptation, but I didn't want any of that life. So I told my uncle, draw me very close to you. Let me teach for you. Even if you don't pay me, just give me some time to teach. I started teaching wire classes, jam classes. And so he occurred to me that, if I stick with this line, if I go to school, I may be able to get to a place where I'll be proud of myself, my family will be proud of me. So I took it up. And while we struggled financially, I think one of the things that really, really motivated me to explore my intellect was just the fact that I felt we deserved better. I literally grew up looking at my dad just suffering in the Nigerian society. For someone who was very smart, he did not really benefit anything out of it. But I felt we could do better. And so I sort of took up that mantle in my family. I was like, you know what, I'm going to study law, and I'm going to make sure I wasn't thinking of a first class particularly, but I wanted to do my best. I think that's the best way I'll put it. A first class is not something people don't talk about these things when I was growing up. Like in upper, these things are not things
common
aspiring.
around. Yeah.
Exactly. It wasn't within my frame of consciousness.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was going in there to give it my best. Whatever would come out of it, I did not know. But I was willing to sort of change my family situation. And going to school was one way I knew I could do that. Yeah.
Why law? Why did you choose law? What was the push for law? And also, if not law, what else do you think you could have done?
That's an interesting question. You see, why I say it's interesting is when I finished my secondary school, I wasn't thinking to study law.
Okay.
The story is I actually bought a JAM form and filled for ISD because my immediate elder sister went for ISD. She was in 100 level when I was taking my JAM. So she used to tell me, oh, ISD is nice. And we sort of had this unspoken competition between ourselves. Throughout our primary secondary school life, she never took second position. She was very good. It only happened once. I think that was in SS2, So we always had that competition with them. So when I saw she took ISD, I was like, okay, maybe I will just do ISD myself. We did not have that kind of mentorship or guidance from parents and tell you do this, do that. Man, that was very free. Like whatever you want to study, that's fine. But my uncle, I remember that day, I can't forget. He came in 2012. He saw me with my JAM form. I was like, what? You filled ISD? He took it and he tore it. He said, there is no way we allow me to study ISD. Like, what? He said, I have whatever it takes to study law. It was law for him. So at first I was shocked, but because I did not really have any guidance, I sort of appreciated that. It was like the first time someone seemed to be taking a very decisive step to guide me in a certain direction. Before then, I did not have that. Not even my father was like that. My dad was hardly around because he was a member of the force. He recently just left the force, but he was then. So he was always traveling. My dad did not really tell me. My dad never even asked for my result one day. Say, the term has finished. Show me your report card. He wasn't that kind of. So I never experienced that until then. My uncle was like, you have to feel in for something better than ISD, and that is law. So I was like, okay, no problem. He bought me another JAM form. And he wrote law there himself. Before then, I had no dreams of being a lawyer. It wasn't there. So it became a new challenge. And I liked that. I was like, oh, wow. So maybe, this means I need to really read harder for my JAM. I need to get a high score. My post-UTME, I need to smash it. It was a challenge. And I felt like someone was expecting something of me. And I was trying to, impress someone. So I took up the challenge. And that was how it worked out. When I got into law, I had no idea. I discovered that a lot of my classmates actually wanted to be lawyers for a very long time.
Yeah.
So, when you sit down, they'll be telling you, oh, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Oh, my dad is even a lawyer. I was like, I didn't have any dream, but I like listening to you guys. So it was a very, very, very funny story. But when I got into the faculty, my first year, I did this moot and mock thing that we do now.
Yeah. I think I remember.
I fell in love with law. It was as though I was born for that profession. I loved it. So, in fact, the one award I cherished the most leaving UNIBEN was being, best orator. That was the award I got when I was there for my class.
Yeah.
I absolutely cherished those moments. So I fell in love with law while I was in the process.
Okay.
So it wasn't something I always thought of. And so if you ask me why law, the simple and honest answer would be my uncle. He was just my uncle. He was the one who wanted me to study law. He just felt I could put my intellect to better use. That was his justification. It wasn't because he thought I'll be a son or anything. He just felt like anything beyond law, beneath law rather, was not the smartest way to utilize my intellect. So he was like, take law. And I just listened to him. Today, I'm glad I did, but that's the simple answer. So the other limb of your question, if it wasn't law, what would I be doing? It's a very hard question because, and I say it's hard because I am now so immersed in the profession that I find it even hard conceptually to extricate myself.
Something else.
It's like I can't even think about. I think
maybe you could have gone for the ISD.
There are two ways to approach that question. It could be what would it have been at the time I was choosing law? That would have been ISD.
Okay.
Yeah. But now, from where I am now, if you ask me if I'm not a lawyer, what else would I have loved to be? With the benefit of hindsight, I'll probably be an investment banker.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would have gone in the line of finance. But what I do now is like structured leverage finance. It's very close. I work with a lot of investment bankers on Wall Street. So it will probably be something along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very likely.
All right. Okay. With academic success that you have attained, it usually takes away some other aspects of your school life. Yeah, with benefit of hindsight, which aspect do you think you could have given a little more attention to while you were still in school?
Well, should I be honest?
Sure, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
The honest answer is maybe I should have had more girlfriends. That's all. But beyond that, I think I had an amazing run in UNIBEN. Like, I had this professor at Harvard Law School who used to tell me something. I would tell him that, I'm going to miss Harvard. And he would tell me, then if you are going to miss Harvard, enjoy Harvard. And then I'll be like, that doesn't make any sense. Even if I enjoy Harvard now, I'll still miss it. And he said something one day that blew my mind. I never forget. It was like, if you leave a place and you miss it too much, it's a symptom that you did not enjoy it. I was like, that's not true. He said, it's true because every memory you have is in some way a kind of undigested experience. That word really hit me. It was like, memory is a form of undigested experience. You remember it too much because there's a part of it you want to relive. It was like, his philosophy was that if you really, really enjoyed something,
you won't miss it.
You hardly miss it. When you think about it, when you remember it, you are happy, but you don't go about missing it because you fully enjoyed it. There is no regurgitation of an undigested experience, And I think it's true when I think about UNIBEN because yes, I feel some nostalgia when I think about UNIBEN, but it's not from the standpoint of I wish I did something.
This. Okay.
No, I really, I played football up to VC Cup. I was present. I loved football. Going to parties, going to clubs. I did some of that with my friends. I had a relationship in school. So the sort of social things people would typically not be involved in, I was involved in those.
So how were you able to balance all these?
Well, at the risk of sounding immodest, when I was in school, law was pretty simple for me. I plan to be honest, as I'll tell you the truth. I may have given the appearance that this was going to break my head or kill me, but the truth is that each time I read law, it felt like a part of me. I understood what was going on. So if it would take two weeks for people to read all these courses, just give me a week of pure attention. I'm good to go. I'm telling you, what was really eating me up before exam was this lecturer. How do I answer my questions? Some lecturers are very intellectual. So your diction, your sentence construction, the way you approach it has to be different. Some others are not so intellectual, so they don't want you deviating too much. You will look like you are showing off. They'll probably think you are not in class. They want you to sort of give them what they gave you. So trying to draw those balances was really what I was like thinking about. It wasn't trying to remember the case. I would remember the case, and I knew that I would remember. So thinking about it from that perspective was easy for me to like do other things. I did most of the things that young men my age would do at the time. I have no regrets at all.
Okay. Talking about attribute, what was the greatest attribute you took from the University of Benin? Definitely outside your certificate or
for sure,
academic.
For sure. I think one thing UNIBEN gives you is two things. Please permit me to give you two. I know you asked.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's two things that, in my experience in Nigeria, it's not as common as people might think. If you attended UNIBEN, you might take it for granted, right? But it's not quite the case for a lot of federal universities. And one of it is a very strong sense of diversity, which is very, very helpful. Because in UNIBEN, you realize that while it is an autonomous university in Edo State, there are a lot of persons from different places that come to UNIBEN. So in your classes, you already have imbibed within you a sense of cultural diversity. It may not seem like a very meaningful thing for anybody to imbibe, but the higher you go up in your career process, the more you begin to realize why it's important to have been shaped at a very young age to respect people's differences. Because if you don't have that early on, it is harder to deal with as an adult. You don't really like certain people. You don't want to give them certain benefits because you think they are not like you. But like in my class, we had Igbos, we had all sorts of people. It's not the same in a lot of universities. If you go to Ife, about 80% of people in Ife are Yorubas. I went to Ife during competitions. I went to Ibadan. I went to Ilori. It's not quite the same in some schools. I went to Abu Zaria. They are all Northerners. So, and the way the Nigerian system is set up, it's not like in the US where you study law as a second degree. Many people come into school 18 years, 19 years, even 17. Some girls are even much younger. They are young. So, to be in an environment where you early on imbibe that sense of cultural diversity is extremely important. Because for someone who had to move, come to a different place, work with different people, I work with Russians, I see how that was helpful, right? Secondly, which I think is actually more important than the first, at least for me, was UNIBEN gives you an uncanny sense of resilience. Resilience is so important because at least in my line of career, I have worked with very extremely smart people, genius level intellect across board. One thing I know that makes people really get to that point where they're like, yes, I'm at the top of this career. It's not smart. I mean, obviously they have to be smart, but there is one ingredient that you can't take away from people who have really gotten to that point. They are extremely resilient. I've worked with people who are willing to burn everything to the ground. They are willing to do that work regardless of the obstacle you put there. They just keep grinding and grinding and grinding. And I'm always appreciative of UNIBEN because I feel like for me, that was one place I went to in Nigeria where there were so many hurdles and I had to like keep breaking through. And it wasn't just me, it was true for so many other persons. The condition, the environment there, it makes you resilient. If you want to do something meaningful, you just have to be resilient. You can't complain too much. You can't waste too much time belly aching over what you don't have. You have to look for ways to make things work. You may not have light in your hostel. You have to find a way to study. All of these things are really important. And it's not. I don't talk about resilience from a position of lack solely. It's not. You're not resilient simply because you lack certain things in your institution. There's a part of that is true, but I feel like the UNIBEN environment itself encourages resilience because of the kinds of people you find there, different people from different walks of life, leaving their states and coming here alone. They are having to push through certain glass ceilings, right? So you find it as something that is just culturally endemic in the fabric of the system. People are resilient. Some other institutions, the kind of things that UNIBEN do, all these some of them are intangible, but when you really think about it deeply, all those things we are building resilience, all this arrow you have in all four, all this, they look very intangible,
Yeah.
but it tells you the mentality of the people there. They are strong mentally. They are dealing with all of these things with themselves, right? Those are things that will trigger, that will inflame other people in other institutions because they don't have that culture, right? So places like UNIBEN, you can see it in pretty much every space you enter into. People are different. They are individually breaking glass ceilings to be there. You have a custody who are scared of this place, but they still live there and they still do what they have to do. That sense of resilience, it's probably for me the most important thing I picked from UNIBEN.
Okay.
Yeah,
You talked about cultural diversity. How is that coming handy for you in your today's job, in what you do today? I know you mentioned you deal with people from different nationality and all that. So how are you putting that into use?
Well, one of the ways I put it into use is I try not to make explicit assumptions about people. I try to make sure I develop some interest in the person rather than the things that characterize them. For instance, if I walk into a space, let's say I have a meeting with Bank of America or Merrill Lynch, wherever, right? I'm a black man, and I'm not just black, I'm African. These things have heavy stereotypical implications, right? So whenever I walk into a place, I am hoping to find someone like me, not just in terms of my skin or my background. I'm hoping to find someone who is gracious enough to pay attention to me rather than all the implications that I carry. And so I extend that grace to other people because I have been in a culturally diverse environment. And I know that I had great friends who were Yoruba. I still have them till today. I have great friends who were Igbos, who were Beninese. I had friends from places that I did not even imagine. People who were of different orientations other than the orientation I had when I was growing up from Upper Sokoba. So it is imbibed in me, and that is a grace I extend towards other people. When I meet people, when I'm working with people, I focus on the person. Forget that this person is black or whatever. Yes, stereotypes are not completely untrue sometimes, but they are incomplete. They are incomplete because every person carries a sort of uniqueness to them. They have a specific story that they've gone through. So if you don't focus on the person, you are going to miss them. You wouldn't know them, essentially. So I think in my line of work, because I work with different sorts of people, that is something I've been able to imbibe mentally. It makes me more approachable. It makes people more willing to work with me because they don't sense any form of judgment, any form of a priori, I wouldn't use the word judgment now. I would say sentiment, placed upon them. They don't feel those, so they feel a lot more comfortable talking with you. And this is a society that thrives a lot on relationships. The Americans, white people in general, they want to talk to you about very little things. So if they don't feel that, they don't feel like you are someone that they can do that with, you're already having issues, not just professionally, but even socially. So that is one way I think I've been able to imbibe it in what I do today, just allowing people to deal with me on a personal basis, regardless of where they come from, whatever backgrounds that they might have, just giving them that grace to deal with you personally. I think is the most efficient way in which I've been able to deploy that very intangible skill into my day-to-day life.
Okay. After UNIBEN, you went ahead to make a first class from the Nigerian Law School. Subsequently, you emerged as Dean Scholar after obtaining a master's degree from Harvard University. Do you at any point have this kind of pressure to succeed, especially looking at your antecedent and what people expect from you? Is there this extra pressure that you need to succeed? Well, I can remember, I think when you were doing your master's, was it after your master's you put on Twitter your eyes, I think for as a result of reading and all that. So is there extra pressure? I need to do this for myself and also for the people looking at me.
Well, it's a very sobering question because ideally some persons will tell you they are confident in themselves, they don't need to have all of that pressure. But the truth is, it's very tough to deal with the social consequences of feeling like you don't meet up to expectations. That's not something you can deny. Yes, you may be grounded, you are strong, you have a good sense of self, but at the end of the day, you are a social being. And much of what you have achieved was a result of the inspiration of other people and also watching other people. You see your seniors do them, you're like, okay, maybe this is the right way to do it. Maybe this is the way I should go. So, in a sense, much of what you have attached to yourself, they were originated by and influenced by other people. So there is that pressure for sure. At least in my case, I would say there is. I wouldn't say it's such it's not it's not a feverish pressure. It's not something that breaks you down, but it's there. I always feel like when I do things these days, it's not just for myself. I mean, it's kind of hard to live just for yourself, especially with knowing where you come from and all of it. It's very hard. People look up to you, and while you may get tired or overwhelmed by that pressure, you like it because it keeps you going. It keeps you on your toes. It reminds you to stay grounded. It reminds you of where you come from. So I would say to some level there is that pressure, but I'm happy now that at least the level I've gotten to, the pressure can't be too much because you sort of the most fundamental things you've done there. You've completed your academics. You're now working. You can now relax into some sort of steady flow, at least for some time, before you pick up the next adventure too. So at this level is not so much, but I would definitely admit that yes, there's that pressure. I would feel bad if I get to a point where I feel like I didn't turn out to be anything meaningful. I didn't turn out to be somebody who could impact the lives of other people. I don't think that's how I want the story to end. So I would admit that there is that pressure to at least do something, with my life generally.
Okay. I remember earlier we talked about mentorship, and you talked about Mavis not having time to motivate people. And you looking at that scenario, do you think there's something you can actually do for the current students to help them, those that want to achieve academic success or even work life? Is there something you can do? I know you are quite busy, but is there an arrangement you think you can do for the students?
Well, on an informal basis, I have that. A lot of persons they definitely reach out to me, and I try to guide them in any way I can. Some of them.
Sorry if I will budge in here. Also,
sure.
how do you manage? Because I know I see some of the messages on Twitter. How do you manage to attend to several messages, several requests like this? Especially not just from University of Benin students, generally from people.
That's a good question. I think the way I've been able to manage it is for one, with time you get used to it, and the way I work, the nature of my job is just as intense. Just to give you a background, there are days when if you work in very high pressure environments, like there are days when I receive up to 500 emails, work emails that I have to read and know what's going on. So the strategy here, and there are timelines within which you should reply emails because everybody's busy. Bankers are calling you, lawyers are, everything is just exploding on a daily basis, and you have to reply emails within 10 minutes. Things can't fall down the tracks in my line of work. So that has built in me a certain capability for things like this, for high pressure stuff like this. So what I do is I schedule. I have a schedule to reply my messages. So if I draw my daily schedule, let's say I wake up 8, I start having my work calls. Sometimes I work till like 10, 11 at night. But on average, let's say 10, that's when I will usually leave the office. Usually from 12:01, I'm attending to my personal. All the messages I left hanging, I begin to clear them. So if you notice, most of my emails will be coming to me very late at night. I'm going through all of them. I'm kicking them off. So I would just say this 1 hour. Just be getting them out of you, and you'll be surprised what you can do in an hour. When you don't have it structured like that, you sort of spend more time because you're not really taking account of the time. You are just doing it. You probably reply some message, you still minimize and go and do some of that. No, when I'm in that zone, I just make sure I clear them. So it goes a long way. It's hard to meet all of them because there are a lot. And another strategy I deploy is I alternate use of my social media. For instance, I've not been using my Instagram for like 4 months now, so that I can focus on maybe attend to more personal issues on WhatsApp and Twitter. When I'm on Instagram, I may not be very active on Twitter, because if you're active on all of them, you are just gonna go crazy. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have certain. I like to think of myself as a very strategic person. More like I focus on efficiency. What's the most efficient way to address this? And I look for ways to make that work. So it helps to schedule. That's what I do. And the fact that my work is not exactly different, it sort of makes it very usual for me. I'm used to just dealing with things on the go. Like as you receive it, kick it off, Don't waste time, don't compound them. Sometimes the stress you feel is because you have compounded all of them. You looked at it, you didn't reply, you're like, I'll reply this later. But then you now have like 200 that you reply later. You're stressed. So the way the teachers at work is, in a day you receive probably 400, 500 emails. So when you see an email, you open it, reply. If it's not for you, bounce. If it's for you, just reply. Just like hit it on the go. And that way you find that you are way more productive. Because productivity is not just the amount of hours you spend, but how much you can do within those hours. Yes. So they sort of teach you how to be productive, and that has also helped me in my personal life. But I'm not going to deny it's not easy, because sometimes it's just overwhelming. But at least I try to make sure I get to my messages.
Okay. Lastly, you practiced briefly in Nigeria with Banwo and Udalo Law Firm. Yeah. And now you are practicing in the United States.
Yeah.
How was the transition like for you from these two different clients?
It's very different. Practice here is very different because it's a lot more intense here. When I was in Nigeria, I used to complain that that work is really intense. At least compared to many law firms, working in a BNI is a lot more intense, because these are like top level law firms in Nigeria. But even at that level, it pales in comparison with what you have here, because these guys are absolute freaks. They are junkies. And I'm not kidding. There are people here. I used to work, I was working with a finance partner. She's the youngest partner. She's the youngest person to make partner at the firm. She did it in 6 years, which was absolutely crazy. This woman was billing close to 4,000 hours per year. She takes, like that on average. American probably bill around 1,800 per year. That's average. But average lawyers bill like 2,205. She was billing close to 4K every year. I've been with this woman on a deal where we'll be having calls 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., like back to back. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. At 8 a.m., she's in the office, steadily on coffee. Like you are working with people who are willing to sacrifice everything for that job.
For the profession.
They are really in love with what they do, and they are really good at what they do. Right? That's the case too in Nigeria. To build a partnership in Nigeria is not easy. You need to love the job. You need to be very hardworking, but the scale at which you operate is different. The US market is very deep, extremely broad, which means you have a larger clientele. You have lots and lots of clients, right, who need your attention. Lots and lots of deals are going through the pipeline. When I was in Nigeria, things were relatively slower. I could be on a deal, let's say a project deal, and we'll close it in like, it probably take a year or a half to close one deal. But here, you close project deals in 3 months. You close financing deals in 2 weeks. And that's a typical financing deal in a Nigerian law firm probably take, at least if it's very quick, maybe 2 months. These guys close it in 2 weeks because there are lots of deals in the pipeline. So they are just burning you out. Like you are just doing everything back to back. So that was one shift that I had to deal with, the intensity and speed of everything. If you're a young lawyer in Nigeria, let's say you're first year, someone gives you a document, let's say they give you an agreement to review, a major agreement, maybe 150 pages. You don't have the technical know-how yet, so maybe you're just reviewing for the things you can catch. They will probably give you a day or two because you're young, unless there's some pressure, in which case they may not even give you, they will just do it themselves. But they could give you a day. Some first years can take 3 days to review that. But here, I will probably get 2 of that in one day.
Oh,
because nobody says, yeah, because you build time. And that's one difference here. You are building your time. In Nigeria, I didn't have to do that. So you have to account for every hour. You can't be telling a partner you spent 48 hours looking at one document. What document is that? Like, even if it's 500 pages, nobody cares. Look for a way to get that done in a reasonable amount of hours that the client can pay for. Like, who is going to pay for? Because I have to review it too. So I was supposed to tell the client we reviewed it in 60 hours. It makes no sense, you know? So everything is very, very fast. They want you to churn out those documents and with a certain level of I think one other thing is Nigeria. In Nigeria, they are, they are absolutely excellent. B&I in particular, they are spectacularly excellent people. But I think in the US, when you work here, you have a heightened sense of excellence and what it means. Because these guys, they don't joke. I'm telling you, I've worked with people who they'll tell you, send me that document. We need to get it out to the client tonight. You send that document. You think this document is good. Someone will read this document in less than an hour. I'm telling you, there was a double spacing in page 242. You're like,
how did you notice that?
I'm telling you, like, I'm not even talking about, because first off, they tell you you can't have problems like spelling, typos. Nobody takes those kind of mistakes. Those are two bare minimum, right?
Yeah.
And they expect your work to be really, really, really good. The expectation is much higher than you would find in the Nigerian law firm, at least in my experience. So these guys are catching errors like double spacing. There's a double spacing here. I mean, there are partners in Nigeria that will do it, but that's not an expectation on you, especially if you are a first year, right? So the intensity, the level of excellence in which they operate, the speed of things is just absolutely crazy. So the transition was not easy. All of that in summary is to say the transition was not easy. But I know one thing. Once you show anywhere you are in that you are willing to give whatever it takes, theoretically, of course you will not give whatever it takes, but if you show a willingness to do that, a lot of persons will carry you along. People who are very, very smart and very, very hardworking and very intense, one thing they cannot forgive is a lack of effort. They can forgive your lack of knowledge because it takes time to build knowledge, but they will not forgive your lack of effort. They will not forgive a scenario where they don't think you are capable and available and responsive. No. So that I was able to show all of that, and that's why I've been able to sort of integrate into the work system, trying to give it my best every day. Not easy, but the transition has not been easy. But right now, I feel like I'm in a pretty decent space. I don't feel any pressure anymore. I don't feel like anybody has some expectation from this guy. They are trying to see if he's able to cope. No, I've already passed those levels. So yeah, I think I'm in a pretty good spot now.
Thank you very much, Destiny. It has been a great time. 1 hour of
yeah, this was a very good conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed myself. Thank you. I really appreciate for taking
no
time.
problem. I think you are doing a very good job. This is not something a lot of persons would do, regardless of your closeness to UNIBEN, regardless of your love for the place. It takes time, and the more we grow, the more expensive these things are. So to commit your time to something like this, helping people back home, through the experiences of other persons that you are cross-pollinating across board, that is really, really, it's amazing. You deserve all the credit for doing that.
Thank you very much, Destiny. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Very happy you reached out. It's been a very rewarding conversation.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be speaking with Destiny Ogedegbe, an attorney in the United States, and the second graduate of the Faculty of Law to make a first class. And it has been an exciting conversation with him. Continue to subscribe, and I'll bring you more exclusive interviews with alumni of the great University of Play. Bye for now.